What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be a little different than I was anticipating. Basically this is going to be part 3.5 because unfortunately I think we're going to have to redo our hinge system here. All right, so here I'm going to show you guys basically what the issue is. This issue came to light because some of you guys actually pointed it out, which I'm very thankful for. I'm glad I didn't go through and proceed this whole thing, get the fabric on, and then realize it didn't fit very well. Initially, I looked at it after it was mentioned, and I thought, you know, the fabric's still going to fit. I started looking at other ones and started thinking about it, and I just thought, let me just go ahead and redo this right now so it's not a headache later. Because our hinge system folds in on itself, when this is totally flat, there's no room for anything to be laying here. So as we go down into our closed position, you can see our bars are basically going to be on the same plane, and this was because of fit issues. But the main problem is we need somewhere for our fabric to go. So as our fabric is pulling in, it's going to start getting pinched by this, and although I think it would fit, over time it being pinched in between these two bars is just going to make it wear out and probably wear holes in it or leave marks, and it's just not going to work out. And also our hinges that we used here, so far at first they seemed like they were going to be plenty strong. The more that I got to opening and closing this thing, yeah, you can see there's a little bit of wiggle. So basically the rivets aren't really hanging in there as well as I thought. We'll go over to the iPad and I'll give you an idea of where we're headed from here. Our roof is still going to lift the same height, but instead of having our hinges fold like I was just showing you, it's going to fold more like a book. The benefit of this is, as it's folding on top of each other, it'll have plenty of room for the fabric to kind of lay in between there, and also it won't be trying to give it kind of a scissor action on the sides, so it should help with the longevity of the fabric in general. And of course, you guys remember I was having a lot of fit issues as far as the material I was using, so what I'm doing here is this is all 3/4 of an inch material. This bottom one is actually 3/4 of an inch thick by 1.5 inches, and I did the 1.5 inches because we're going to be doing piano hinges. Instead of just two little hinges here and here, it's going to be a full length piano hinge, as well as one up here, which are also aluminum. Instead of it all being riveted to the camper itself, I'm going to do Rivnuts and 1/4-20 bolts, stainless bolts, so it'll be completely removable, and I think that'll help a lot in the powder coating process. So yeah, let's get to it. Here we've got all of our pieces laid out. What I use to cut my aluminum, my miter saw, and I just have a Diablo steel demon blade on there. It's a high tooth count blade, and it cuts right through aluminum just like you're cutting wood. It's really awesome for stuff like this and makes it a lot quicker to process material than it does by just using a bandsaw. After that, of course, we just give everything a light sanding and clean up our edges. In total, we got 8 pieces of 16.25, and then we have 8 pieces of 34.5. So the reason I did 34.5 is because our hinges are 36 inches wide. So by the time we sandwich 2 3/4 of an inch pieces, one on each side, we'll have an overall width of 36 inches, and we won't have to cut down any of our piano hinges. These are all aluminum construction. As I mentioned previously, I'm going to be doing Rivnuts and stainless bolts to attach this to the camper, and these should be much stronger than our original version, and I should never have to worry about these wearing out. Although it's not necessary, it is really helpful to have a welding table like this to help fit up all your pieces, especially when you're working up smaller sections like this one. Now that we've got all of our frames made, now we're working on attaching the hinges. So the middle hinge, I am going to use rivets still for this, just because of clearance issues. And also you can see I have a ton of rivets that I'm going to be putting in this thing. I used my jig and drilled holes, staggered them so the heads can't interfere whenever this tries to fold. As far as placement goes, I'm basically just folding this down, so it's easy enough to just butt this up against here and have it clamped down to the table. We'll go ahead and start drilling some holes, put some rivets in, and then after that, we can flip this up, drill some holes on our other one, and then have our hinge system all attached here. Here we are using 3/16 of an inch diameter rivets with a 1/4 inch of grip. These each have a shear strength, I believe, of around 380 pounds according to Google. So having all these rivets here should really keep the center part of the hinge nice and solid. When lining up our other side on the hinge, we want about a 1/4 of an inch gap of empty space in between both hinges. Go ahead and do 2 test holes, get the rivets in, and fold it over, and make sure that both of your edges line up evenly when it's folded. If not, this will interfere with the process of raising and lowering the camper. Here we're going to make our handles to give us some leverage when closing the camper. We can get the old hinge system uninstalled on one side and start working on putting our hinges and Rivnuts in to get our new hinge system installed. When placing our Rivnuts for our top hinge, just keep in mind that the screw heads are going to protrude up, and make sure they will not interfere with any of our crossbars in our ceiling. Near the end of the video, I'll go in a little more depth of what I did for each of these hinges to cover some things that may not be as clear in these time lapses. We're doing our front side of our hinge system. There's something I just wanted to show you guys. Because my roof is still attached, it was a little tricky to get the holes drilled on that side. I'm not sure if I got that on the time lapse or not, but what I did was take some of these clamps, some spare pieces of aluminum, and just kind of clamped this up in place, marked it with a Sharpie, and then took a punched a little hole, which will help me drill nice and center for my Rivnuts. Up top, I only have, 3 Rivnuts here. So as you guys remember from the last video, I had some pieces of 3/4 aluminum going across here for other hinges to mount. Well, now that's where we are mounting our Rivnuts. So we got 3 here, the middle will be blank, and then 3 here. That should be plenty. If you're building this and planning ahead of time, I would have added another bar here, so I could have done some in the middle, but I think that'll be plenty strong. We got a total of 7 holding it to top of our hinge system. So we'll get this attached, we'll get our hinge all bolted up, and then it'll allow us to start working on our lower part. Another way to make this step a whole lot easier is to completely remove the roof. Me working on this by myself, it was just simpler for me to try to drill overhead. Make sure you wear your safety glasses. Aluminum shavings are going to go absolutely everywhere. But that being said, you can pull it off while it's still attached to the camper like this. We've got all of our new hinge systems installed. I'm going to give you guys a little demo of opening and closing. Just like in the past, we get in the camper, give a little pressure on the roof on our backside. Something you may notice that's different from the previous version is I didn't have to undo those straps to get our front to raise. And that's because on the way down, we no longer need those straps to keep the front from rising. I am still gonna add some sort of locks for these. As you can see, they can still move. It's no big deal. It functions the way it does right now. And to close it, we'll go ahead and grab our front handle, grab our roof handle, start bringing it down. If you guys remember from the last video, this is the point where I would take my strap with my carabiner and clip it here and on the other side to keep our front from going up while we close our rear. Because of the way the new hinge system is set up, it's no longer necessary, which is awesome. It saves you a step. As you see, you can just close the front and then go ahead and start closing the rear of the camper straight away. And it's all closed. I'm gonna run through here and kind of highlight the design just so you guys can get a better understanding of it if it's not totally clear. So we have 3 piano hinges on each side. All of them are 36 inches long. Our middle ones we have riveted. That way when it's folded up, we have plenty of clearance. There's a ton of rivets here. I don't think I'll ever have to worry about these working loose like what was happening with my previous design. Coming on the inside here, on our bottom, we have Rivnuts attaching our piano hinge to our main structure as well as to the bottom of our hinge. So what that means is that that's totally removable and able to be swapped out if anything in the future ever happens to it or when we go to get it powder coated. We have the same system going up here, except for we have 1, 2, 3 on our landing bar up here and another one up there. Like I mentioned a little earlier in the video, when you're building this out, go ahead and just do another bar here and do a couple more Rivnuts. We've added this handle here to give us a little bit of a mechanical advantage. Obviously, if I was just pulling from this point, I don't have as much leverage as I do from up here. We're above the folding point, and when you go to pull down on it, it just is much easier to pull when you're up a little bit. No real science behind this design. It's just some of the 3/4 bit that I had laying around and just figured I'd go ahead and make me a nice little handle. Some other things to note about when you're doing your hinges, my old hinges had enough, I guess, slop in them, like side to side, that when it closed, you could kind of center the lid so it's perfectly flush. When you're doing a hinge like this, because it's so rigid, you're gonna have to make sure that this thing is perfectly center. It's also very important for each of these to be square. So my front hinge, this one, I tried to bend it and move it, and whenever it closes up, it's sitting off just a little bit off to the side and a little inset on this side, which actually shifted my lid over slightly. So I had about a 1/4 inch gap and it wasn't sitting flush on the sides. All I did there was actually just kind of make our holes a little bigger for our bolts to go through our Rivnuts. It allowed me to kind of shift the bottom of the hinge over, and now when it closes, it sits nice and flush. So something to expect when you are designing your hinge system yourself. Here we are in a partially open position. I just want to show you guys a better explanation of why I went to these hinges. So as we're closing the camper, we're going to have fabric that's going to want to go somewhere. With our old style hinge, these 2 bars would start creating kind of like a scissor action, so the fabric would have to kind of fold in between them and just probably end up wearing out over time. Because our new hinge folds more like a book, we actually now have probably a little over a 1/4 inch gap for the fabric to lay in. Obviously our fabric's not very thick, so that'll be plenty of space for a fabric to kind of tuck in here, and there's nothing for it to get worn out on, no sharp edges or no hard pressure points that the fabric is going to have to deal with. As far as the strut sizes go, in my past video I outlined what type of struts and everything like that. I will have them linked in the description of this video. They are 40-pound strut, and I believe they are 40-something inches long. Like I said, I'll have all those details in there, as well as my previous video that truly outlines every aspect of these struts. I originally wanted to go with the 50-pound ones, and I'm glad I didn't. The 40-pound ones do work well. Obviously, when I get my roof vent fan in there, it'll be a little heavier. You may have noticed when I raised up the roof, I did have to push up on that side to get it to fully extend. Once it's up, it is holding it perfectly fine, and I don't think there was any need to go to the 50-pound struts versus the 40-pound ones. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below, and I'll answer them to my best ability. If you feel like I left anything out, or maybe there's some details that I didn't quite cover, all the parts that I've used are going to be linked in the description. If you have any question about strut placement, refer to my last video. I have a full detailed in-depth dive at me installing the struts and why I placed them where I did, so go ahead and refer to that. And there's also a link to a video by Wander with Kate, and she's the one who helped me decide on what struts I'm actually going to go with. In the next video in this series, we will actually be getting this camper on the truck. I just got back from a recent trip, and I was kind of waiting for that trip to be done so I could take my camper shell off and the awning, kind of strip the Tacoma down and get it all ready for the camper. So it's pretty exciting to actually get it on the truck here soon, start building out that back wall and finishing up some details. And I think we're right on the road to getting this thing in use. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.